Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Grimminger with the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Our program's mission is to nourish the mind and spirit and serve social justice. Our forums occur on most Sundays at noon and are free and open to the public. We encourage you to attend. Our church is located physically at 4700 Grover Avenue in Austin, Texas. For more information about our Public Affairs Forum, you can go to our church website at www.austinuu.org. And now Richard Halpin will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Carolyn. Welcome, everybody. I am Richard Halpin. I'm here to introduce a visionary who brings souls together, a person who believes in the principle of loving God in loving your neighbor, in souls touching souls. A man who sees the souls in people in distress and says, together we can create healthy alternatives. And we see souls touching souls. A man who brings alive the principle that we are to do with others as we would have them do with us. A man who lives what is written right up there on that wall. Will you read it with me? We gather in community to nourish souls, transform lives, and do justice. It really captures what this extraordinary human being does. The times I have been out with this man at Community First Village are times I have felt very simply, easily, and at peace, as if souls were touching souls, that present, that easy, that wondrous. Please give a warm, wonderful welcome to Brother Allan Graham.
Thank you, Ben. We're going to start with a little video here.
We are not individuals on an island, and we do not pick ourselves up by the bootstraps. We desperately need each other. Our mission is to the chronically homeless. These are the folks that we love the most.
Awesome, man. What's your name? Mike. Mike, I'm Allan.
Years ago, when we started the food truck operation, going out and feeding people, we had no clue who the homeless were.
Hey, brother. Y'all need some food? There we go, right here.
We began to learn that the single greatest cause to homelessness is the profound, catastrophic loss of family. When we bought our first RV to lift one guy up off the streets, we were clueless. As we just said yes to these little calls, the Lord equipped us to do what it is that we're doing better and better and better. And out of that stemmed the Community First Village. It has been simply amazing to me the depth and breadth of community support that this vision has had. Here, we have built an RV park on steroids to lift chronically homeless men and women up off the streets. 140 microhomes designed by some of the most gifted architects in the world, and an RV park of 100 RVs. Providing palliative relief to men and women who are in a state of suffering that you can't fathom. People that are battling addictions, mental health issues, loss of jobs. They come into this village, they settle, they begin to cultivate, and they start caring. Incredibly, our friends that are moving into the village, they are now feeding their neighbors that are stranded on the street corners. It's transformative.
May this place bring you comfort, refuge, and rest. Come settle your soul, finding health and happiness. May this house be more than a safe place to live. May it be your sanctuary, your safe haven. May it be your place to go. So welcome up, please.
So it was an extraordinarily cold winter day in April of 1981 in Denver, Colorado. And two friends of mine who were in this video, Tony and Linda, were in their apartment complex, in their apartment. Tony, in his mid-20s at the time, is tattooed from head to toe with tattoos that are primarily acquired while he was in prison several different times. Tony has two tattoos, two teardrops tattooed under one eye, the word psycho on the side of his neck, and just underneath his collar line are the numbers 13 and a half, which stands for 12 jurors, one judge, half a chance. A knock comes on the door, and Linda goes to answer the door, and she opens it, and it's snowing outside, and there's snow all over the ground and the front porch, but there's nobody there. And so as she's backing away and closing the door, she hears a sound and looks down onto the ground, and laying in the snow is a little 5-day-old baby boy in a diaper. This 5-day-old baby boy had been born to a crack addict and abandoned at their doorstep. Tony and Linda took this child in, the child's name is Gordy, and began to raise this child as if it was its own. And I love the contrast between the badass Hispanic gang member tattooed from head to toe with two teardrops under his eye, the word psycho on the side of his neck, and 13 and a half under his collar line, willing to take in a child that did not even belong to them and begin to raise it as if it was their own. I met Tony and Linda and Gordy about 12 or 13 years ago. They were introduced to me by a street preacher named Dwayne, who ran Church Under the Bridge here in Austin. Tony had recently been released from prison in Oklahoma City at this time, had heard that Linda and Gordy were in Austin, Texas, and had traveled by bus overnight from Oklahoma to Austin, and ended up himself at Church Under the Bridge. And as Tony is navigating around Church Under the Bridge and in Austin, trying to figure out what to do next, he's listening to the sermon, and his eyes get distracted by a man there that has a little puppy dog. It turns out that the badass Hispanic gang member also loves puppy dogs deeply. One of the most caring human beings that I've ever met. And out of the side of his ear, he hears the name Gordy, and he looks up, and he starts working his way up towards the front where Pastor Dwayne is preaching. And there he is, his son, Gordy. Gordy's now in his early 20s. Linda's just off to the side. So here this fragile little family is reunited providentially under a bridge at I-35 and 7th Street. This too was during the cold winter months of Austin, Texas. Tony and Linda and Gordy lived in a cardboard box near Ben White Boulevard and Woodward. And during the cold winter nights, Tony would find himself in a Walmart or an H-E-B or a Walgreens or a CVS, stealing as much toothpaste as he could, and then rifling as many newspapers as possible out of the newspaper stands to go back to their cardboard box home And he would lather their limbs up with this toothpaste and then wrap them in order to keep warm during the night. Pastor Dwayne ended up befriending them and brought Tony, Linda, and Gordy to us in the early days of founding our Community First Village model, where we were purchasing gently used RVs and lifting folks up off the streets into privately owned RV parks in the city. And we were able to acquire one for Tony, Linda, and Gordy. We moved them into the Midtown RV Park at 7th and Airport Boulevard. For the first several nights, Gordy would wake up after spending the night, wake up in the morning, about 5 o'clock, that was his normal deal, walk 10 feet down the hallway to where Tony and Linda were sleeping, and say, "Mom, Dad, get up. It's time to go. We have to check out." You see, at this point, Gordy, who at 5 years old had a grand mal seizure, probably related to the crack cocaine addiction occurring while he was in the womb, had the mental capacity of about a 7-year-old. Grown man, 7-year-old mindset. "Come on, let's go. We got to get out of here." "No, Gordy, it's okay. We're not at the Salvation Army. We're not at a weekly motel. This is our home. We can stay." And finally, Gordy became acclimated to this. Well, Gordy and I began to develop a pretty tight friendship. In fact, Gordy began to believe that he owned mobile loaves and fishes. And as part of my compensation package, I get to drive a mobile loaves and fishes truck that's got all the logos on the side of that truck. And Gordy knew that those trucks belonged to him. "Allan, when are you going to let me drive that truck?" And I would tell him, "Gordy, I will teach you to drive someday." And I knew it was a lie. Gordy didn't have the mental capacity ever to drive. The motor skills were not there. And he still suffered from these grand mal seizures. In fact, at this stage of his life, his face was Frankensteinian in nature. It was so scarred from the multiple sutured wounds over the course of his life of having these seizures, and wherever he would drop, if there was anything in the way, it would lacerate his face. Well, in December of 2014, Gordy suffered one of these grand mal seizures while he was taking a bath, and he drowned. And this was devastating for Tony and Linda. Linda happened to be out of town at the time. My wife, Tricia, and I get this phone call, and we head to their home. By this time, the police were everywhere. Place was taped off, no admittance type of a thing. There's an investigation underway, as there should be. Was this an accidental death, or was there a homicide involved? And we knew the answer, but nonetheless, the police had to do what they needed to do. We were negotiating with them, trying to get the opportunity for Tony, at this time now in his late 50s, still tattooed from head to toe, with tattoos primarily acquired while he was in prison. 2 tattoos, 2 teardrops under his eye, the word psycho on the side of his neck, and 13 and a half right up under his collar line. But after about 35 years of those tattoos on a worn, sun-dried body, they didn't look very good. Tony had also lost a leg to diabetes at this point, and there wasn't a lot of giddy up in Tony's get along. But Tony desperately wanted to go back into that home and say one last goodbye to the son that wasn't his son that he raised. One last kiss on the cheek, one last touch on the shoulder. but they wouldn't allow that to happen. So I can't imagine, as a parent, losing a child and not being able to have that last moment to be able to say goodbye, where that human-to-human, heart-to-heart connection is so welded together, but is being ripped apart by a system. They warned us that when the coroner was going to be coming out, that in most cases there's an emotional eruption. And they gave us fair warning. Sidewalk was lined with about 10 police officers. And the coroner exited the home with Gordy in a body bag. And it appeared that they were going at rocket speed to get Gordy inside the coroner's vehicle. As soon as they emerged from their home, Tony gets up, and it took every ounce of energy that I had, along with several others, just to hold Tony back. You could feel the guttural emotion pouring from every pore of his body at the sight of his son wheeling down this sidewalk on a gurney inside of a body bag. We had Gordy cremated, and I was blessed to be able to go and pick up Tony and Linda to take them to the funeral home to pick up the urn with Gordy's ashes in it. And just as the funeral director was handing this box of ashes over to Linda, Linda just collapses. It's just an extraordinary witness of an outpouring of love, knowing that there's this physical disconnection, but at the same time, there's this spiritual connection that is so deep and so penetrating. I'm in awe watching this. The funeral director is experienced at this, sees this all the time, almost on a daily basis. Not something so much that I'm used to, and we're trying to marshal them to get them out of the funeral home and back into the truck, and we do. Tony is sitting in the passenger seat up front. He's got the urn sitting on his lap. Linda's in the back seat, and I start the car, and Tony looks up over at me and he goes, "Mr. Allan." He picks up this urn, holds it in his hands, begins to move it across the console towards me. "Would you let Gordy drive?" And sets this urn right on top of my lap. And here we are, driving down 183 with this urn sitting on my lap. The three of us are crying. We're going down memory lane, talking about all those special moments of this 7-year-old and now a 30-something-year-old body. The special moments that make us cry, those special moments that make us laugh. All of this emotional marinade inside this truck. And we only get these opportunities when we collectively and individually make the choice to go into places that perhaps we're taught never to go into. Somebody that is tattooed from head to toe, with tattoos primarily acquired while they're in prison, with teardrops under their eye, the word psycho on the side of their neck, and 13.5 under the collar line. We are told to repel, to walk away from these things. But when we do, we miss this phenomenal opportunity to penetrate a millimeter beyond what we see visually and discover some of the most extraordinary discoveries that you can discover. You see, we believe very powerfully that the single greatest cause to homelessness is a profound, catastrophic loss of family. There is no one that we have ever lifted up off the streets of Austin, Texas, that came from a loving family environment. And there's no definition of what we're talking about as a loving family. We're just talking about human beings coming from a place where they are fully and wholly loved, and they are fully and wholly known. Virtually no exception to that rule. The most broken, battered, despised, bruised people still have two innate qualities, the same qualities you and I have. We want to be fully and wholly loved, and we want to be fully and wholly known. And when you've been kicked to the corner of society and abandoned by everybody, including those that should be the closest to you, the outcome is going to be obvious. So what we're seeing spilling out onto our street corners today is a 3-generation of a cataclysmic nuclear bomb being thrown into the original cell of social society, and that's our family. However we describe the family, there's something going on internally, culturally with us that's creating this problem, because it's not drug addictions and mental health issues and physical health issues and affordable housing and living wages. These are very important issues of justice, very important. We must battle these issues every single day. But at some point in time, you and I have to swim upstream of the level 5 rapid river to understand why so many people are flowing down this river. And it's happening because of the breakdown of the family and the breakdown of community. Because I will tell you that 2,000 years ago, if my brother Richard and I went out to hunt and gather early in the morning, and we both had families back at home, if I took a wrong turn, slipped and fell off of a cliff and died, Richard would take that bad news back to the village, but Richard and the village would come up around my family. They would begin to model the values of the village to each human being that had an experience of a profound, catastrophic loss of family. This is what we see out on the street corners. I can tell you the other thing that I've learned through people like Tony Cormona. I can promise you this. When we were 12 years old, all of us, and we're laying in bed at night in that little twilight period right before we're about to go to sleep, and we're looking out the window and we see the starry, starry nights, and we're dreaming about what we're going to be when we grow up. I can promise you, without any exception on the planet, that none of us were laying down dreaming about being chronically homeless, smoking crack cocaine, and prostituting to support that habit. No one. They're all like us. We're all like each other. I can tell you that when I was 12, I had 3 fundamental fantasy dreams of what I was going to be when I was going to grow up. 1, I thought I could be a rock star. I played guitar and had a little band. Okay? So I dreamed that one day I was going to be Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin up on the stage singing those songs. I can tell you that today, at 62 years old, when I drive around town and a great Led Zeppelin song comes on, I'm on that stage with that guitar in my hand. Amen? Yeah. And I know it's never going to happen. My second fantasy, I played football when I was a kid. And I thought that I could have a career when I was young playing football. Of course, you can tell that God did not bless me with the DNA to do that. But nonetheless, when I watch a great football game today and some kind of a great play happens, I can rewind back to junior high and high school days and see me doing those things. And then the third thing that I wanted to be was a jet fighter pilot. Okay? And I will stop everything on the planet when I hear a plane in general flying overhead and look up. I became a private pilot many years ago, simple VFR pilot. But when I see those jets like a F-22 screaming across the sky, I can see me in the cockpit of that $100 million airplane. Uncle Sam cannot see me in the cockpit of that 100. And I know it's never going to happen. Do you know what I'm talking about? And so what we need to be able to do is go in and mine those fantasies. Those still exist in our lives. Now, I fulfill my fantasies in a different way today because I know I'm not going to be any of those three things. But I grew up in an environment that allowed for me to be creative. So the idea of community first is a model that says that we must live in community. We must take care of each other. We must learn how to deal with each other's so-called disabilities. And we all have them. We all have them. I love talking about my marriage. This year, Tricia and I will celebrate 33 years. It's been a glorious journey for the two of us with 5 children in one home that we've only lived in. But I can promise you that neither of us are perfect. And our ability to expand that love for each other has more to do with our ability to tolerate the things that seem to agitate us the most about each other. But we've gotten into this world today where any level of intolerance is no longer accepted by us. Therefore, we continue to push people. You can see it in our political environment today. Nobody in this room has ever seen the caustic nature of a political environment the way that we've seen today. And it doesn't matter what our political values are. For the most part, we always got along. Whether you're Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Independent or whatever, there was always that human-to-human, heart-to-heart connection, but something is blowing this up, and it's not policy. We've always been arguing policy. Policy will never end the policy arguments. It's like there's a Jerry Springer mentality here in this country. We would just want to see each other up on stage, beating each other up, ripping our clothes off, and peeling our hair out of our heads. You know, and being excited about that. How did we get to that level that is now manifesting out here on our street corners? Well, Community First is that model. It's a 27-acre master plan community that says to the entire city of Austin, come, be with us. Come, meet our friends. Come and penetrate through the tattooed from head to toe with tattoos primarily acquired in prison. Hey, come and hang out with some people that are still battling their drug addictions and other issues. And come be a part, a vital, life-giving part of forgiveness, reconciliation, healing, and redemption. This is the key. What we're doing today is that we're dusting our hands off and we're abdicating this responsibility to City Hall, to Austin, or to Washington, D.C. And we need Washington, we need Austin, and we need City Hall, and we love them. They can't do this. We can do this in partnership with them. We look to government to play a subsidiary role to us in these big human needs. Why? Because you and I need to be fully and wholly loved, and we need to be fully and wholly known. And no institution can ever bring those two qualities there. Now, as I close, I can tell you that as good as our video collateral is, as good as our website is, as good as I may be able to communicate, you can't fathom what I'm talking about unless you come out and see this place firsthand. It has to be witnessed. And so my invitation to you and to everybody that is listening to this televised forum is to please come out. We have an Alamo Drafthouse movie theater, and every Friday night are free movies outside in a 500-seat amphitheater. We have an organic farm that is the most awesome urban organic farm you have ever seen. We have a blacksmithing shop, an art house, an operations building, medical clinic, a store, the community grill, catering and concession operations. It's a beautiful, peaceful place with a little bit of a side order of some knucklehead tension because humans are involved. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Now we're going to have question and answer, and I want to start off with my first question. I work in the probation department, as I was telling you, and work with homeless people, people looking for a home and to be known and loved. I mean, that's what we all want. So what is the referral process? How would a person apply and get accepted?
Yeah. So first of all, our definition of the people that we're moving into the community, 80% of the people that we move into the community are chronically homeless. And this is an unaccompanied male or female, no children, with a disabling condition, having lived on the streets of the Austin area for at least a year, or multiple episodes of homelessness adding up to a year over a 3-year period of time. In Austin, we have a homeless management information system. Most major cities do. Our system is managed by an agency called ECHO, Ending Community Homelessness Coalition. And within that homeless management information system that tracks people that go into shelters, criminal justice, healthcare, etc., they've developed a model called a coordinated assessment, which attempts to rank people based upon their vulnerability. From a 1, which is kind of the cream of the crop of the homeless, chronically homeless population, up to a 20, which is somebody that if we don't get off the street soon, something catastrophic is going to happen, probably death. They drop down a funnel to us, and they come and apply with us, and we begin to call from that population based upon a demographic profile that we're trying to achieve. And in our community, we want 20% high vulnerables, 20% low vulnerables, 20% veterans, 20% what we call the downtown frequent flyers. They're the men and women that are constantly in and out of downtown Austin Community Court for violations related to homelessness. And then 20% of our population are actually called by the gospel or their spiritual life to live in community. And so we have about 35 folks that live on the property. So.
Thank you. We have a question from Richard Halpin.
Tell us, thank you so much for your presentation and your inspiring work, and we all appreciate it. Let's give Allan a round of applause, can't we, for all the work they do together. How is this gift of living in this gifted community funded?
100% of our funding comes from primarily private individuals. There's no government funding in our deal other than like Capital Metro obviously serves our community, and Travis County helps subsidize some of that. But all the capital costs and all the operating costs currently come from private individuals. That's also our model.
If you could stand up and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Fancy Fairchild, and I've been out there twice already, and it's beautiful, and it's really inspiring. Thank you so much. One thing is, I'm kind of not asking a question, but one thing is, I think that there need to be communities like this all over the United States for every kind of people, not just for homeless people. Because when you see how people live there and how it's using space in a good way, not wasteful, not having their own yards and everything, it's really something. I would really like to have a community like that. But the other thing is, I work with people in group homes a lot, and group homes are horrible, horrible places. And I'm just hoping that you can squeeze a couple of percentage points for these people that are just hanging on. And what they do when they live in group homes, it's so difficult for them that it causes them to be homeless over and over again, and they just keep going back to the group homes. So I'm putting in a plug for those people who live in group homes. Thank you.
And it's a great plug, and I believe in everything that you say. It's we actually believe that we've created a new movement. Of course, it's stupid to say that we created a new movement. We're just going back to what I think both anthropologically and biblically we are called to do, which is to live in community. And that's the sense that folks are getting when they come out onto the property. And so every quarter we hold a 4-day symposium out there, and people are coming in from all over the United States and some internationally to learn about this model, because it applies to folks that are incarcerated, the folks that you talk about, single moms with children. And we want to see this expand really to return all of us back to living in a community environment, because today most of us in this room can recognize that we're living inside these hermetically sealed single family sarcophaguses that we call the American dream. And we've been sold something over the past 3 generations that's not working out very well for us, because we now have these 8-foot tall privacy fences, swimming pools, sport courts, and barbecue pits in our backyards, and our front porches are about that big, and they need to be as big as this room. A front porch is the gateway of welcoming. And when you come to our village, there are no back doors, no backyards. Everyone has a front porch and chairs on that front porch. So let's get this movement going.
We have a question from Luther Elmore.
Yes, could you speak about your continuing project, Feeding the Homeless, and the kind of the operations of that, and where you originally got your beginnings?
Yeah, so the beginnings occurred about 20 years ago with the idea that we could take a catering truck and leave areas of town where folks are have an abundance of resources and head out onto the streets to those that lacked that abundance. Today there are 12. I just bought truck number 13. Will be delivered tomorrow. It'll take another couple of months to get it retrofitted. Those trucks go out on the streets virtually every night of the week with about 100 meals, so about 1,200 meals every night, 365 days a year, encountering men and women on the street corners, weekly rate motels, and some very low-income housing projects. This development, this particular part of our ministry was the foundation, because there were 3 things that were happening with that truck. We didn't understand it when we started it, but we understand it now. First of all, the truck goes to where you are. We're not herding people to, say, a soup kitchen. And that's not an indictment on soup kitchens. It's just That's what we do. We herd people to those. The second thing is that when our trucks go out, they're full of brand new food purchased from wholesale food suppliers, not leftovers, dated, 2-day-old donuts and stuff like that. Then the third thing that was very powerful is that those that were serving on the trucks and those being served were on the same side of the serving counter. And it required a one-on-one, human-to-human, heart-to-heart relationship. And that's where the miracle, that's what led us to this intimacy that we, Mobile Loaves and Fishes, has with the men and women that are on the streets. So that part of our campaign is still very, very, very robust.
We have a question from Grant Robertson.
I come into contact with quite a few homeless people, and you had mentioned that one of the requirements was a disabling condition. Could you clarify exactly what counts so that I can know whether to recommend your services to these people?
Yeah, basically three things: a mental disability, a physical disability, or an addiction disability. Pretty broad. Okay?
One of the things I've noticed out at your Community First Village is the wording of the Community First Village. It took me a while to understand that you use those words in that order very purposely. So, A, would you talk about that a little bit, and then B, would you share with the folks your sense of entrepreneurism, the activities you have out there, the businesses, the activities, and how the residents, the citizens out there play a role in those businesses?
Yeah. And so when you think about the United States of America, and again, there's no place that I would rather live on the planet than the United States of America. And how we were founded, that a bunch of crazy people ended up getting on a boat and dropping everything, family, and going across the ocean a couple of thousand miles to land in a place where there was zero infrastructure, and not even really knowing where they were. The individualism that it took to do that DNA strand has moved and permeated who we are as a country. Whether it's our refugees that are moving and abandoning their homeland and coming here, there's this individual can-do spirit about who we are that's very powerful, that I think has gotten taken out of context in the past 2 to 3 generations, where we're so focused on the individual. Even our Constitution, which I'm all for, not trying to change our Constitution, is all about our individual rights. And so we've created a culture centered around the individual that oftentimes has a negative collateral impact on the community, and how we draw those in to be synchronized in a very powerful way. So Community First is saying, wait a minute, I get our individual responsibilities, but we also have this ginormous responsibility to the community. Richard and I were talking about social work, and social workers end up becoming very focused on the individual. I want to help this person, and sometimes we have these blinders on and we're not looking at the collateral impact that individual is having on the broader community. And so sometimes we have to call people from the community who are creating behaviors that are not conducive for community. I will tell you that just recently we welcomed someone back in the community that we excommunicated about 7 months ago, and we were really excited and pumped, and that welcoming home. But his behavior needed to be more brought in line with what we were doing. There was a second part to your question that I lost. Oh, the entrepreneurial side. Well, I make no bones about it. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've never held a job in my entire adult life that wasn't something that I created. It's one of the things that actually draws me close to my friends, because I think if I was back in high school and they were diagnosing for ADD and ADHD, I would be one of those guys. I just couldn't pay attention very long in school. Totally social oriented, and in all of the jobs that I had as a high school and college, I was a pretty pathetic employee. But I love to work and I love to participate, and that entrepreneurial nature is something that I recognize in my friends. I'll tell you that when I moved to Austin in 1976, 41 years ago, I can't even believe that I can spew those numbers, 41 years ago. It begins to make me sound pretty old. There was nobody panhandling. That was the exception. People were selling flowers, bottles of water, newspapers, and Velvet Elvis art on the street corners. Anybody want to admit that they still own Velvet Elvis art? Come on, man. And what we've done is we've taken away we've taken away from those men and women who live in extreme poverty the opportunity to be entrepreneurs by either outlawing or so over-regulating their ability to go earn a living that the only remaining bastion of entrepreneurialism remaining is the First Amendment free speech right, which I agree to beg for money. And that's why we have the panhandlers. We've gotten an ordinance change with the city of Austin that is going to allow us more flexibility in mobile vending that we hope to get launched over the next year. So watch out for that. We think we can mitigate panhandling by 50, maybe as high as 80% in downtown Austin by giving people an opportunity to go and sell stuff like they do in every other country on the face of the planet. You can't get off an airplane in any country without being assaulted by a gauntlet of entrepreneurs selling everything. Yeah, so we're very entrepreneurially can-do spirit. Yeah.
Businesses you have out at Community Village First, you're able to rehab RVs, you're able to do oil changes for people who come out as volunteers. You've got a whole list of things you do out there.
Yeah, and growing. So it begins with the Outdoor Alamo Drafthouse movie theater and the free movie nights with concessions and our grill, all staffed by men and women that live in the community who earn about an average of $35 an hour for every hour that they work out there, typically a 4-hour shift. We have a bed and breakfast out there. You can go to bnb.com or bed and breakfast or whatever it's called, and we have 20 B&B units out there, and we generate about $20,000 a month in revenue off of that. And the men and women that are doing landscape maintenance and housekeeping all live in our community. We have an art house where men and women, and it turns out that a lot of our neighbors that live on the streets that are battling profound mental health issues are off the freaking chart on the creative spectrum. They irritate me because I can only do the stick figure thing. And come on, there's got to be something creative in me. And they create this beauty, and we help them move that into the economy where they can earn a dignified living. And it's incredible the stuff that they're creating. Some of them are so off the charts that who knows what will happen in their future. We have a blacksmithing shop where they're creating blacksmithing products. We have this organic farm that's, even though I have 2 full-time farmers, everybody that works up underneath them are men and women that live on site. And if you come out and work on the farm, you're going to be led by somebody that used to be standing on a street corner. We're working a partnership, we hope right now, with Charles Mon Toyota to partnership on our oil lube business, where you can bring your car out on a Saturday morning to work 4 hours on the farm, and we're going to change your oil, lube it, and detail your car, and the money that you pay will go 100% minus the cost to the men and women that are out there. Plus we have the catering and concession operation. We're dreaming up all kinds of new things and bringing them online because people want to work. They don't want to be lazy. That opens up a whole nother conversation, which we don't have time for sure right now, but it's the insidious nature of how we as a country direct benefits to those that are extraordinarily poor by not allowing them to really work and participate in the economy when they get those benefits. And that's an important issue of justice right there that I think this country needs to come to grips on. So,
with your current housing situation at the village, is that maxed out? And if so, then do you have the ability and the plans to expand it?
So the village has a capacity of about 280. Depends on how many couples we have in the RV area. We are at 160 right now. We onboard about 3 people a week. So sometime in the first quarter to half of 2018, we will be at capacity. Plenty of demand. We own the 24 acres that's contiguous next door to the west of us. We're in the middle of the site development permit process. That process will be complete by the end of the year. We're actually launching a campaign that will be publicly revealed on November the 8th. That's a $60 million capital campaign to do phase 2, phase 3, and a phase 4, phase 3 and 4 on some future property that we don't know where that is yet. So the second phase, which is a $20 million phase, will add about 350 units that could lift about 400-ish people up off the streets.
Hi, I'm George Garcia, and thank you for the pretty amazing work you just described. My question is, do you have any some of the residents transition out of the village, out into the community? And by that, I don't mean going back out on the street, but to something more positive.
Yeah. The answer is fundamentally no. We believe that if you really want to understand homelessness, it's very important for us to understand what home is. And we believe that there are 8 characteristics associated with home. And the first characteristic is that home is a place of permanence. And this is the place where you and I can dig and plant the deepest of tap roots that are just almost inextricable and that people want to be in community. So we do live in a society of fixing and repairing human beings. And I just contend that you and I are not, especially at the level of the chronically homeless, fixable and repairable. And so in the 20 years that we've been doing this, having lifted hundreds up off the streets, I can think of one person that went off to a 40-hour-a-week job, left our program, and got married. One person. And so our goal is to settle people and place them in an environment. Because if they were to come into our community, just like the woman was talking about earlier, the extraordinary nature of community, and then all of a sudden they pop out and move into an apartment complex in Pflugerville, and this is an indictment on apartment complexes in Pflugerville, they're going to be alone again. That's what will happen. So, not a transition. But sometimes we do have to cull the herd from people that aren't working well inside the community. It's not very often. We have about a 92-93% retention rate right now.
Once again, you mentioned your garden, and so do you consume the products on that, or do you market a portion of those products?
Thank you for asking that question. We consume essentially 100% of the products. One of the things that we've noticed with people that live on the streets is that they have what we call a McDonald's level diet, 3 meals a day. Again, no indictment on McDonald's. Happy for us that eat their burgers. You just can't eat that food 3 squares a day for the rest of your life without dying. And so the men and women that live in poverty, whether they're chronically homeless or just people in poverty, can't afford to eat, organic, whole foods, $4 or $5 a pound heirloom organic tomatoes, or $6 or $7 a dozen free-range chicken eggs. So we grow all that and give it away free. And what we're witnessing in people just moving about 10-15% into a whole foods diet is something pretty remarkable on the physical and mental side of things. But sometimes we get an overproduction of something that can't be consumed because there's so much of it. And we're under construction on a building that will include a large health department certified inspected kitchen that will allow us to can those products and maybe move some of that stuff into the economy.
We have one last question from Melanie Walter Mahoney.
Last question. I wanted to inquire about the process for coming to visit, if you, and also for volunteer opportunities.
Volunteer opportunities, go to our website and look up underneath the volunteer, and there's all kinds of things, and you could register there. If you wanted to do like a big serve event, like this church community wanted to bring 50 or 100 people out, we would navigate you into a different strategy in order to make that happen. But all the one-offs are listed on our deal. As far as coming out and visit, if you want to have a tour, if you'll email me, alan@mlf.org, alan@mlf.org, I'll get you directed to the folks that can tour. And then there's also, every Saturday morning, there's 2 tours that you can sign up for on our website on Saturday mornings. I think one at, I think it's at 9 o'clock, and the second one at 10:30, something like that, that you can just sign up from. So we love people coming out and checking us out. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you so much.